Joining us on POTUS, we have Ashlee Stephenson, Republican strategist, president of AxAdvocacy. We wanted to talk a little bit about that special election in Texas, among other things. You will find her on the X at Ashlee, ASHLEEWRICH. Ashlee, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me today.
So did the alarm bells go off? Did the red siren start flashing when we saw this race the other day in Texas?
There's a lot of pearl clutching over the weekend, Tim, but I think it's important to always remind ourselves special elections are always that, just a special case. And look, we know that the party out of power always overperforms in special elections. We've seen it for the last, almost a year through a host of different specials that we've seen at the state legislative level to a couple of other big ones. And there are a couple of things about Texas that I think is important for your listeners to understand, that this wasn't just some pure example of a Democrat cleanly outflanking and defeating a Republican in what is ruby red territory. Texas is a little bit peculiar in the way that they set things up. They have a jungle primary, then it's followed by the special runoff, which is what we saw last Saturday. So in the first round of voting, you had multiple Republican candidates, not just one or the other. This was in this special jungle. They got over 52% of the collective vote, really overperforming the Democrat in that round. But when we got to Saturday afternoon, this is where it got tricky and polls closed, around 8 o'clock in Texas. The Democrat ended up having a higher overperformance. 21,000 people who voted for the Republican in the first time just didn't show up. So it's really a case of attrition, Tim. There's going to be another shot at this seat later this year. I think the Republicans should win it back because of all of the big statewide races happening in Texas. But the bottom line is this: Republicans do have to figure out how to turn out their voters in these non-presidential years. It's just that simple.
The impression we got from listening to Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, is that Republicans messed up because, they think that they were going to be doing much better with the redistricting. And this is just proof that that's no guarantee to success.
Well, time will tell on the great mid-decade redistricting, whether it's in Texas or a whole host of other states that have taken this on. And the bottom line, Tim, is that just nobody knows. Is it a risk? Sure. But it's the first time in modern history that the U.S. House majority is smaller than that of the U.S. Senate. With general election competition totally declining, you're playing around the margins. So I think it's really, for both parties, and it's perfectly legal, it's the smart thing to do to try to redistrict where you can get the state legislatures, or however it works on a state-by-state cases, to take it on, because you could end up in just a 5 or 6 seat majority. So we'll see how it all plays out. Of course, the leader is going to say that's his job to spin, but I just don't think we know yet.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting because in Maryland now, the House in Maryland has moved forward with redistricting. The Senate may block it. In Virginia, they're kind of getting sort of lukewarm on the idea of making it happen. I know that, this mid-decade, what'd you call it, the great mid-decade redistricting or whatever we want to call it, rebalancing. I'm not sure how much appetite there is for this now. It seemed like maybe the fever had broken.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're in the state legislature and you've got often a really limited window to get things done for your constituents, because sometimes state legislative sessions are just a couple of months out of the year, if you're not a full-time legislature, for example, now you have this potentially on your plate, and it's taking away from doing the business that your constituents in these states really need you to. You've got state legislatures messing around with redistricting, and that's taking time and attention away from other really pressing matters. So I think that could be some of it. And we see that it's cooling off, as you said, in Virginia. The courts got involved. And then in Maryland, the state Senate has been pretty clear it's a no-go with them, but the political pressures continue to intensify from the governor and others. So we'll see how that plays out.
Again, Ashlee Stephenson with us, Republican strategist, president of AxAdvocacy. Looking at the latest numbers, the polling numbers on ICE, about 59% of voters, according to a Fox News poll, say that ICE is too aggressive. Obviously, there's a little bit more on the Democratic side saying they're too aggressive. How much of this is an issue that will last until we get to the midterms? We'd heard so much about, it's all going to be about affordability is going to be the catchword of the day. And we're going to have to see how much people's money is worth when we get to November. I mean, is this ICE issue something that sticks around?
Well, I think it's important to counterbalance that by saying polling also continues to show that a majority of Americans do think that illegal immigrants, especially the ones who are committing heinous crimes, should be deported and that the border should be secure. But there's no doubt about it. And it's why we've seen, I think, a little bit of a directional shift coming out of the administration following Minnesota. that seeing masked agents arresting people on the streets is pretty un-American, Tim. I would anticipate that you're going to want to see DHS try to put a stop to this as much as possible. Those aren't great images, and it's in some degree it reminds us of what we saw in 2018 of the family separation and things like that the administration's come a long way from compared to where we were that first go around. But look, it could be here to stay. But here's what I'm paying attention to: is this a place where potentially Democrats could over index, and it could potentially become a new movement like a defund the police and retroactively going back to, totally open borders? And you were playing a clip on the Grammys earlier as you have Bad Bunny performing this weekend at the Super Bowl. There were some speeches just a couple of nights ago talking about ICE and immigration and that there should be no borders and that sort of thing. Americans don't want that. So it's a real treacherous place for Democrats to be, I think, to potentially overplay their hand. And I think it could backfire if they take it too far, similar to defund the police. And that was catastrophic.
You're not saying that musical entertainers are out of step with America, are you?
No, I thought that Hollywood took a cue and cooled things off for a bit. We saw it all come back in the Grammys a couple of nights ago, so I guess they just can't help themselves.
Yeah, seems to work that way. Well, Ashlee, I appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for jumping in today.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Ashlee Rich Stephenson, Republican strategist, president of AxAdvocacy. And if you're looking for her, you will find Ashlee. She is available on the X at Ashlee, that is ASHLEEW, Rich.